They say betrayal stings worse when it comes from blood. I used to think that was just a line people tossed around in movies or country songs. But then I spent a year building a future with my son in a cold, oil-slicked garage, only to learn the truth the hard way. Sometimes the knife doesn't come in a fight, it comes with a handshake. The first time Eli walked back into my life with more than a shrug and a phone full of buzzwords, it was a Tuesday. I remember because that's laundry day, and my hands still smelled like detergent when I let him into my garage. He dropped out of his MBA program, something about disillusionment with capitalism and a desire to build something real. I thought maybe, just maybe, he meant it. My name's Jack Bennett. 62. Retired machinist, self-taught coder, and widower. My late wife Nina used to say I was more machine than man, but always in the voice she saved for people she loved. She passed 3 years back. Cancer doesn't negotiate. The house has been quiet since. Too quiet, if I'm honest. The garage became my church. And Eli showing up. That felt like a sermon starting. He walked in wearing that smug startup kid smirk, all beard oil and optimism, saying things like disruption and market ready. I should have known. But I didn't. Because when your only son asks to build something with you, you don't reach for logic. You reach for a wrench. It started with a leak. My neighbor's basement flooded last fall, pipes burst, thousands in damage. Insurance gave her a runaround. I told Eli, what if we had a sensor that could detect water before it wrecked the place? Something simple. Cheap. Wireless. His eyes lit up. Not because of the tech. Because he saw a dollar sign with every drop. I dug into my old scrap pile. Circuit boards, weatherproof casings, lithium coin cells, stuff most folks would throw out, I treated like treasure. I rigged up a basic prototype, a smart water sensor that pinged your phone when it detected moisture. Eli worked the angles, marketing plans, pitch decks, even a half-baked name, Aqualoom. I didn't love it, but it wasn't mine to name, not really. The idea was ours. At least, I thought so. Nights became ritual. He'd bring over burgers, and we'd spend hours debugging firmware, testing sensor ranges, running simulations. I'd explain concepts, he'd nod and say, "That's gold, Dad." And one night, while soldering a new board, I looked up at him and said, "Let's keep this simple. No contracts. Just 50/50ths. We're family." He grinned, that smooth, practiced grin that used to melt teenage girls and win over teachers. "Absolutely, Dad. We're in this together." We shook on it. I should have known better. I've worked in shops where men shake hands before screwing you out of your pension. But I wanted to believe. Hell, maybe I needed to believe that my son wasn't like the rest of them. I stored everything, the designs, firmware, testing logs, on a flash drive shaped like a wrench. It was a novelty gift from Nina, back when novelty gifts still meant something. She used to joke, "You'll never lose this one, Jack." She was wrong. I never lost it. But I did misplace my trust. We were 2 months into development when the first red flag hit, but I brushed it off. Eli started coming later and later, citing networking events or strategy calls. I kept the code going, refining algorithms, testing new enclosures. The wrench-shaped drive became my lifeline, my backup, my proof, my anchor to a deal made in grease and solder. Looking back, there were 100 tiny signs. The way he flinched when I mentioned sharing updates with a local engineer friend. How he skipped over my name in the team slide on the pitch deck, calling me technical support. How he once said, "We need a younger face for investors, you get that, right?" I got it. I got it real good. But I didn't say anything. Not then. Not when he skipped another night. Not when he said he'd be handling the business side, and I should keep doing what I'm good at. I just kept building. Because it's what I've always done. I build. And I stay quiet. Nina used to tell me that was my strength. Turns out, it's also how you end up erased. That night, the last good night, we sat in the garage, wires everywhere, the sensor working perfectly. Eli raised a bottle of root beer and said, "We're gonna make waves, Dad. People are gonna know the name Bennett." Funny thing, that. Because soon enough, they would. Just not both of us. Before he left, he looked at the flash drive in my hand, the little wrench twinkling under the overhead light. "That still got all our files?" he asked. "Our files," I said, nodding. He smiled. "Keep it safe." I didn't realize he meant, "You're gonna need it." It started with missed calls. Not a big deal at first. People get busy. Schedules overlap. I left a few voicemails, nothing dramatic, just updates on the sensor firmware, tweaks I'd made to reduce false positives, a new water-resistant coating I was testing in the backyard with a garden hose and a plastic tub. No response. Then he canceled a meeting we had scheduled for Tuesday. "Investor thing," he said over text. "Raincheck, Dad. Big opportunity." I remember standing in the garage, his empty folding chair still holding the dent of his weight from our last session. I read the message twice. Investor thing. That was new. Wednesday came and went. I worked alone. By Friday, I hadn't heard from him at all. It was Nina's voice I heard in my head. "Don't jump to conclusions. He's a grown man now. Trust comes first." So I gave him the benefit of the doubt, until I didn't. The following Saturday, I decided to take a drive. Eli had once mentioned he was working out of a co-op space downtown, some shared office with beanbags and kombucha on tap. I figured I'd surprise him, maybe catch him between meetings, show him the new casing designs I'd 3D printed. Downtown was a different world. Where my boots felt out of place and the parking meters took cards. I found the address, a slick-looking brick building with black-framed windows and a sign out front that read, "The Foundry, Innovation Hub." Inside, it smelled like eucalyptus and ambition. I told the receptionist I was looking for my son. "Elijah Bennett," I said. Her eyes lit up. "Oh, you mean the Aqualoom guy? They've got an event upstairs." Aqualoom. I followed the sound of music and clinking glasses. When I walked into the upstairs loft, I froze. There it was, Aqualoom Inc. In 6-foot-tall vinyl letters across a white wall, beneath a projection screen showcasing animated water droplets and buzzwords like smart protection, next-gen detection, and peace of mind, one drop at a time. And standing next to a very polished-looking podium, shaking hands and laughing with suited investors, was my son. Eli. Founder, Elijah Bennett. That's what the slide said. No mention of me. No co-founder. No story about a father-son garage build. Nothing. He wore a navy blazer, his beard trimmed, a microphone clipped to his lapel. His hands moved like a magician as he spoke, charming the room. Behind him was a looping video of the sensor, my sensor, mounted under a sink. Same casing. Same board shape. Same blinking blue LED I programmed. A man approached me, hand outstretched. "Tyler Griggs," he said, "early investor. You with operations?" I shook his hand. "I'm Jack." "Ah. Facilities?" I didn't answer. Tyler chuckled, clearly misreading the silence. "Well, we're about to hear some pretty exciting projections. Elijah says this tech's going to be in every smart home in America. Brilliant mind, that one." I left before the keynote started. On the way out, I caught a glimpse of the product booth, clear acrylic display stands with 3 demo units wired up to fake sinks. A young intern in a branded t-shirt explained the features to a cluster of potential partners. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell or cause a disruption. I just walked through the crowd like a ghost. No one stopped me. No one knew me. And my own son never even looked my way. Back home, I sat on the porch with the flash drive in my hand. The wrench-shaped body glinted in the early evening light. I plugged it into the laptop and opened the root folder, Aquilum DEV build _03 circuit _v4. GBR. I scrolled through it, numb. Every line, every component ID, every little comment I'd written in the code, still there. My initials. My timestamp. The little quirks in my naming conventions. It was all mine. Every bit of it. But the world had just met Elijah Bennett, founder. Later that night, I checked our shared GitHub repo. It had been scrubbed. No shared commits. No activity under my handle. I clicked on my profile, and it said, access denied. He locked me out. The sensor we built together, what started with late-night soldering and caffeine, was now behind a paywall I couldn't climb. Not without a password. Not without a key. I stared at the screen for a long time, and when the screen dimmed to black, I saw my own reflection. Tired. Wrinkled. A man who believed too long in the wrong things. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the room to go cold. Long enough for my coffee to go cold. Long enough for a certain clarity to creep in. I opened a drawer beside the kitchen table. Inside was a pile of old mail, some utility bills, and a recipe card Nina had written in her slanted cursive, her peach cobbler, the one she never measured right but always made perfect. Under that, a single sheet of paper. A notarized NDA agreement, signed in ink by both Elijah and me. My eyes landed on the date. March 4, 2021. The signature line had that tiny that I always add before my J. A lifetime habit. Proof, maybe. Not legal armor, but something. Something real. I held it in my hands like a relic. Like a warning. Like a weapon I hadn't planned to use. Not yet. But the war had already started. I just hadn't realized I was the one being conquered. The next time I saw Eli, he was sitting in my driveway. Not calling, not knocking, just waiting in that sleek black electric car he leased on credit. The kind of car that whispered, "Look how well I'm doing," even if you had to sell off the truth to get it. He didn't even get out right away, just sat there scrolling on his phone like I was a lunch meeting. When I opened the garage door, he finally looked up. "Dad," he said, smiling like a politician caught in a scandal but still convinced he could charm his way out of it. "Hey." I didn't smile. "You busy? Or just parked here for the ambience?" That made his smile twitch. He got out, shut the door too softly, like noise itself might make this worse. "Can we talk inside?" We sat at the kitchen table, the same one Nina picked out 20 years ago, the same table where Eli used to do math homework while I made coffee and muttered about fractions. Now it sat between us like a judge. He placed his phone face down on the wood like it was some kind of peace offering. "Look, I know you're upset." "You do?" I said, folding my arms. "Help me understand how that happened." Eli sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's just the way startups work, Dad. Investors want a clean story. A solo founder with a vision. That's the model. Garage built, sure, but they don't want to hear about 50-year-olds and flash drives." "You mean they don't want to hear about me?" I said. He looked like he wanted to disagree but didn't have the strength to lie all the way. "It's not personal." I reached into the drawer beside me and slid out the NDA. The one signed and stamped by Mrs. Halperin next door. I laid it flat between us, tapping my finger on the seal. "What's this?" he asked, feigning innocence. "It's the thing you laughed at," I said. "The thing you called paranoid. The thing I kept, just in case." Eli didn't touch it. Didn't even lean forward to read it. I'm not suing you, I said. I don't need your money. But don't sit here and pretend this was an accident. It wasn't, he said finally, his voice low. But I didn't think it'd get this far. Get what far? Lying? Stealing? Stop, he said sharply, and for the first time, there was that flicker of his real self, the same voice that shouted when I took away the car keys at 17, the same temper that used to scare Nina until she'd talk him down with a soft hand and a firmer stare. I stayed quiet. He breathed out through his nose, shaking his head. We can fix this. I'll give you founder emeritus, maybe 5% equity, a little credit in the back end. We just can't undo the story now. It's out there. 5%. I stood up without a word and walked to the garage. He followed, still talking. Look, I know it sounds cold, but it's how these things go. Hell, Apple started in a garage and look what happened to Wozniak. I turned around, fast. Don't quote Apple at me, Eli. I worked 40 years turning steel into function. I built this sensor from scraps and tutorials. You built a slide deck. His mouth opened, but I didn't give him the chance. You stole my work. You locked me out of our code. And then you smiled in a room full of investors and told them it was your idea. I pointed at the wall where the pegboard still held our first circuit prototype, hot glued to a piece of plywood. That's mine. And you know it. He didn't respond. Just stared at the floor. After a long silence, I said, you should go. He didn't argue. Just picked up his phone, nodded once, and walked out. I watched him drive away. No dramatic exit. No yelling. Just silence, the same kind he used to fill every room with when he was disappointed in something. Usually in me. Later that night, I opened the flash drive again. Not out of nostalgia, out of strategy. I scrolled past the files I'd built, deep into a folder labeled Drafts. That's where I found an old pitch deck, one we made together months ago. Aquilum_pitch_v1. PPTX. Slide 2, developed by Jack and Elijah Bennett, a father-son team combining 40 years of engineering and business acumen. It even had a photo of us. Taken in this very garage. I was holding up the breadboard prototype, Eli giving the camera that damn smirk. Nina took it with her old Canon, back when pictures meant something. I printed the whole deck, every slide, black and white, fast draft mode. Didn't care how it looked, just needed it on paper. Then I opened a fresh document. Scanned copies of my handwritten notes, the circuit sketch on the back of a diner receipt, the first test logs. Everything that proved the story didn't begin with Eli in a blazer. It began with me, a wrench-shaped flash drive, and the garage Nina once called my second heart. I didn't know yet what I was building. Not exactly. But I knew this much, if my name was going to be erased, it wouldn't go quietly. The invitation wasn't addressed to me directly. It came through a forwarded email from an old acquaintance of mine, Ron Becker, used to work with my wife Nina on local water board contracts back in the day. His message was short, almost apologetic. Thought you might want to see this. Aquilum's having a public launch. He attached a glossy flyer for a launch party at a tech space called The Current, a converted shipping warehouse dressed up with neon and startup energy. Eli's face was right there in the corner, backlit like a prophet. Founder Elijah Bennett unveils the future of water safety. No co-founder. No Jack. I stared at that flyer for a long time. My thumb ran over the crease in the paper where I'd folded it without realizing. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do. Confront him? Crash the party? Just watch. In the end, I shaved, pressed the only sport coat that still fit, and showed up. The valet didn't know what to do with my truck. He stood staring like it might leak oil on the pavement. I told him it wouldn't, handed over the keys, and walked inside. The warehouse glowed. White walls bathed in LED uplighting, tables of hors d'oeuvres sculpted to look like ocean currents, branded cocktails with names like Sensor Sangria and The Floodplain. The Aqualoom logo was everywhere, etched into ice sculptures, projected onto brick walls, printed on glass tumblers. No one noticed me. I walked the perimeter like a stranger in my own memory. They'd set up an exhibit wall with a timeline of the company's origin. The first line read, 2022, Elijah Bennett, inspired by water damage in a family friend's home, begins development of a sensor prototype. That was my neighbor's basement. My neighbor. The one whose call sparked the first sketch I made on a napkin. But here it was, reduced to a family friend. No mention of the garage. Of me. The early prototype on display was mine. The casing still had the same scuff I accidentally made when I dropped it during a heat test. I leaned in, pretending to admire it. A young woman in a branded polo approached. "Cool, right?" she said. "Our founder made that one himself." I stared at her. "You sure?" She hesitated, then smiled politely. "That's what the deck says. We just go by what's approved." I nodded slowly. Of course. People milled around, laughing, networking, sipping cocktails. They spoke in acronyms and buzzwords, talking about scale, Series A, IP licensing. I stood alone until a hand clapped my shoulder. "Hey there. Jack, right?" I turned to see Tyler Griggs, the same investor from the last event. His handshake was too tight, too performative. "Glad you could make it," he said. "Elijah mentioned you were part of the early tooling. Cool to see you here. You should mingle. This thing's gonna be huge." I smiled. "Thanks. I'll keep that in mind." Then I saw Eli, standing near the stage. He was talking to two men in expensive suits, his hand moving like a conductor's. He spotted me. For a second, he froze. Then he turned to one of the security guards and leaned in. It took less than 5 minutes. I was near the hors d'oeuvres table when a man with a coiled earpiece tapped my arm. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private event." I blinked. "I'm on the list." "Name?" "Jack Bennett." He checked his phone. "Sorry. You're not listed as an attendee." Behind him, Eli was watching. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just waited. "I see," I said, my voice even. I didn't fight it. Just nodded, turned around, and walked toward the door. That's when I heard it, just behind me, a whisper. "Wait, wasn't that the guy who built the prototype?" It came from a kid with a name badge that said Josh, software intern. He was looking at me like he'd just recognized a face from an old photo. No one answered him. I walked out into the night. The air was cooler now. Sharper. The kind that carries a different kind of weight, one that settles not in your chest, but behind your eyes. Back home, I opened the flash drive again. I clicked into the root folder and found the file marked Pitch V1. The old PowerPoint opened with a familiar click. There it was, our original branding, both names on the cover slide. Aqualoom, a father-son approach to smarter water monitoring. Each slide told the truth we'd once shared. The story of nights spent in a garage under a flickering lamp, hands greasy, solder burning, code breaking. The circuit board, the schematic, the test logs, even the slide where we talked about how Nina inspired us to build things, not talk about them. I started printing. One by one. Each page slid out of the printer with the soft rustle of paper reclaiming its voice. By the end, I had a stack nearly an inch thick. I placed it in a manila folder and labeled it by hand, Original Build, 2021. I stared at it for a long while. This wasn't a case of being forgotten. It was erasure. Erasure with intention. And the thing about being erased is, it doesn't make you disappear. It makes you dangerous. I started with tea. Old habit. Coffee's too sharp when you're angry. Tea forces patience. You have to boil the water, steep the bag, wait. It's slow. Measured. Exactly what I needed. The morning after the launch party, I sat at the kitchen table, same one Eli once spilled orange soda across during a tantrum when he was 10. That stain's long gone. But other things linger. I looked at the manila folder I'd labeled Original Build, 2021 and then back at the notarized NDA. Simple document. 2 signatures. 1 seal. March 4, 2021. We'd signed it at Mrs. Halpern's kitchen table, across the hedge that separates our houses. She's 81 now, sharp as ever. She's also a licensed notary, been one for decades. Used to help small businesses file incorporation papers and homeowners notarize refinance docs. When I asked her to notarize the NDA that day, she raised an eyebrow at the simplicity of it. 50-50, she'd said, reading the line. No lawyer. We're family, I told her. She gave a long sigh. Even more reason to write things down, Jack. Turns out, she was right. I walked over to her place that morning with the document in a padded envelope and a tin of her favorite shortbread cookies from Macklin's. She answered the door in her robe and curlers, one eye lined perfectly, the other untouched. Well, she said, eyeing the envelope. Did he pull something? I didn't answer directly. Just said, I need your ledger. The day we notarized this. You still keep it? Of course I keep it. You think I trust the cloud? She turned and shuffled into the kitchen. While she dug through a drawer, I stood in the doorway, breathing in the smell of mothballs and lemon polish. Her house looked like a time capsule from the 70s, but she kept everything, documents, receipts, even a paper calendar on the fridge with birthdays circled in red pen. She handed me a large, cloth-bound book. March 4th, page 112. I flipped to it. There it was. Our names, our signatures, the document title, the time, 3:37 p.m. She leaned over my shoulder. He was fidgety that day. Remember? Said you were being overly cautious. You were right to push for it. I need a copy, I said. She raised one eyebrow. For legal? I shook my head. Not yet. Just, for proof. In case. Mrs. Halpern took the book back gently and walked it over to her scanner. It buzzed to life with the slow, deliberate grind of old tech still doing its job. She handed me the printout, then placed her hand gently over mine. You were always the builder, Jack. He just liked the story. That stayed with me the whole walk home. Back in my garage, I laid out everything on the workbench like I was prepping for a new project, the NDA, the notarized ledger copy, the original pitch deck, early sketches, timestamped test photos, even emails where Eli asked questions about microcontroller power consumption. It wasn't a legal case. Not yet. But it was a body of work. A quiet archive. A kind of truth that didn't need to shout. I scanned everything and saved it to the flash drive. The wrench-shaped one Nina gave me. Then I made copies. One on a thumb drive I labeled failsafe. Another I uploaded to a private folder on a secure cloud account under a different email, one Eli wouldn't know. And I printed hard copies of everything, 2, 3-hole punched and filed into a binder marked Aqualoom Development Archive. Somewhere in that process, I realized I wasn't just documenting. I was preparing. Not for revenge, at least, not the theatrical kind. Not explosions or lawsuits or viral videos. I was preparing for the moment he'd blink. When something would go wrong, and he'd need to explain the cracks. And when that happened, I wouldn't need to knock down his door. I'd already be sitting inside. I didn't call him. Didn't threaten. I went back to my routines, walking in the morning, feeding the neighbor's cat while she visited her sister, organizing old tool drawers. But at night, I wrote down every version of the story I could remember. Dates. Places. Notes from development sessions. Things he said. Things I said. Not for court. For me. For clarity. Nina once told me, write it down, Jack. So they can't talk over you later. That voice echoed now louder than ever. A week later, I got a text. From a number I didn't recognize. Hi Jack, this is Tyler Griggs. Wondering if you're open to a private conversation about Aqualoom. Let me know. No pressure. No pressure. I didn't answer. Just saved the number. The fact that he was reaching out meant something had shifted. Then, 3 days later, a podcast episode landed in my inbox. Sent by Ron Becker again, with no message. Just a link. The Hidden Hands of Innovation, When Founders Erase the Builders. Episode 213 of Tech Undercurrent. About 10 minutes in, the host dropped my name. My real name. Jack Bennett. Called me, the man behind Aqualoom's original sensor prototype. Said rumors were circulating about co-founder erasure and IP theft. They didn't claim outright fraud. But they cast doubt. And in Silicon Valley, doubt spreads faster than truth. I sat back in my chair. The garage was silent. Just the hum of the mini fridge and the occasional creak from the beams. I didn't smile. Not yet. This wasn't revenge. This was the beginning of a correction. I never hired a lawyer. Not because I couldn't. Not because I didn't want to. But because I knew the moment I stepped into a courtroom, Eli would spin it. He'd paint me as the bitter old man trying to ride his son's coattails. Dad's upset he didn't make it past the garage, or worse, we let him help out early on, but this was my vision. That's the thing about court, truth gets filtered through money and microphones. But the court of public opinion? That's a different beast. It doesn't care how glossy your website looks. It cares who got there first. So I started with the one thing I always trusted more than lawyers, the facts. I emailed a mid-tier tech blogger named Carla Vance. Her articles were messy, full of typos, but she had a nose for what she called founder fraud. Her inbox had a tip line. I sent her the notarized NDA, the prototype schematics, timestamps, GitHub screenshots, even the original pitch deck with both our names. No editorializing. Just documents. Then I sent a shorter, cleaner package to a local podcast called Build It or Break It, run by two ex-engineers who like talking about small-town startups that got too big too fast. I attached one paragraph. This is the original pitch deck for Aqualoom. Note the co-founder. Note the dates. Ask why the story changed. Lastly, I emailed a guy named David Keller, former reporter from The Ledger, a local paper that ran a story on me a decade ago after I designed a valve system that saved a school from flood damage. David owed me a favor. I cashed it in. I didn't send anything to Eli. Didn't warn him. I let silence do what it does best, turn worry into wildfire. The first blog post hit 6 days later. Ghost founder, the real mind behind Aqualoom. It wasn't front-page tech news. But it hit the right notes. Called Eli's origin story, tidy, too cinematic to be real, and quoted parts of the pitch deck where my name was clear as daylight. It included my circuit schematics and code screenshots. Didn't accuse Eli of theft, just asked why the timeline didn't match public records. That was enough. 3 days later, Build It or Break It dropped an episode titled, Code, Credit, and the Garage Ghost. It went deep. Real deep. One of the hosts traced the firmware commits on GitHub, lined up timestamps, and pointed out how a user named J. Bennett56 had been contributing core logic for months before Eli_Bennett even created his account. They called it the cleanest quiet excommunication we've seen in startup history. Then Keller ran a column in the Ledger, from garage to ghost, what Aqualoom isn't telling you. That one stung Eli's people the most because it was written by a local, someone who knew me. It made the betrayal personal, not just professional. Suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. Tyler Griggs texted again. Then emailed. Then called. Jack, let's have lunch. Talk face to face. There's no need for this to go further. I didn't respond. Instead, I uploaded a zipped folder to a whistleblower site called FounderFair, where they archive disputed tech IP. I didn't add commentary. I just dropped the raw files, dated and signed. The document spoke louder than anything I could say. The next week, Aqualoom scrubbed their website. The Founder's Story page disappeared. Eli's TDX-style video, gone. A new page popped up with generic placeholder language about a small, passionate team building smarter solutions. His face was still there, but smaller. Less spotlight, more shadows. Whispers started making rounds on forums. Investors talked. People posted side-by-sides of the pitch deck, the original with both our names, and the polished investor version where I was missing. One guy tweeted. It's always the dads in garages. And it's always the sons in blazers who get the credit. The tweet got 14,000 likes. I didn't comment. Didn't repost. Just bookmarked it. Eli finally cracked. He left a voicemail I replayed 3 times just to be sure I heard right. Dad, can we please talk? You've made your point. Just, let's talk. No apology. Just control slipping. And it got worse, for him. A YouTube tech channel called Circuit Snaps did a segment breaking down my original prototype. They held it up next to the current Aqualoom model and showed how the board layout hadn't changed, only the plastic casing. They ended with a question. If this guy built it, why was he erased? Comments flooded in. Most were sympathetic. A few were brutal. Welcome to Silicon nepotism. He built it. They branded it. File a lawsuit, Grandpa. We'll crowdfund it. I didn't. Not yet. I sat in my garage, the space where it all started, and looked at the prototype sitting on the pegboard. It was still blinking, still working, same firmware I wrote with cracked hands and sore eyes. Eli was scrambling. Trying to reclaim a story that never belonged to him in the first place. And me? I wasn't done. I've signed every document the same way since I was 12 years old. It started as a mistake. Back in 7th grade, I wrote my name too fast on a history test, accidentally dotted before the J in Jack. My teacher circled it and wrote, "Neatness matters, Mr. Bennett." I didn't fix it. I leaned in. From then on, every form, every lease, every blueprint or invoice had that little dot before my name. It was small. Subtle. But it was mine. A kind of fingerprint. The mark of a man who didn't ask for permission to exist in a world of straight lines. I never thought it would matter. Until a reporter named Carla Vance called me 2 weeks after the Whisper campaign started to snowball. She sounded breathless, like she was running between phone calls. "You still sign your name with that dot in front?" she asked. I paused. "Always have." "Why?" "I think you're going to want to see this," she said. "I'll email it." "Don't forward it. Just look." She hung up before I could ask anything else. The file came through 30 seconds later, a scanned patent filing from 6 months ago. Application number 17 divided by 993x times 2. Owner, Aqualoom Incorporated. Inventor, Elijah Bennett. My heart thudded when I opened it. There it was. My sensor schematic. Identical to the one I built, down to the pin layout and logic gate configuration. Filed under Eli's name. Claimed as sole inventor. But that wasn't the worst part. Near the bottom of page 3, under the submitted by line, there was a digital signature. J. Bennett. My chest went still. That was mine. Not just the signature, the document. The version I drafted in April, saved on the flash drive, named patent_draft_final_v3. Docs. The signature was embedded into the original metadata. Eli hadn't even rewritten it. He'd copied my draft, filled in new contact info, and filed it as his own. He forgot the dot before the J. Carla's email had one more line. I sent this to a patent examiner I know. She flagged it for review. No promises, but this could get real ugly for him, fast. That night, I printed the patent file. Sat at the table and stared at that tiny dot for 15 full minutes. One mistake. One grain of ego in a sea of arrogance. It was beautiful. The next morning, I uploaded the file to FounderFair and added one sentence to my previous archive. Note the signature style. Compare metadata timestamps. The site updated its front page, potential patent misrepresentation in Aqualoom filing. By the end of the day, 3 more blogs picked it up. Reddit caught fire. Someone zoomed into the signature and circled the dot with a caption, "That's not just punctuation. That's a death sentence." Investors don't like uncertainty. But they hate intellectual property disputes. Especially when patents are pending and the SEC is watching for red flags. By Friday, Aqualoom's homepage was replaced with a maintenance screen. Saturday, a leaked Slack screenshot surfaced, Eli begging his CTO to clean the repo history ASAP. Someone replied, "Too late. Git is forever." That was the first time I laughed in weeks. Sunday, Tyler Griggs called me again. I picked up this time. "Jack," he said, his voice thin. "Let's talk." "I'm listening," I said, even though I wasn't planning to say yes to anything. "There's pressure. From the board. From the legal team. They want a clean path forward." "Funny," I said, "they didn't care about that when I was wiped off the website." "You've made your point." "No," I cut in. "Not yet." Silence. "Then, we'd like to offer a buyout." I chuckled. "You want to buy silence?" "I'm not selling." "It's not like that." "It's exactly like that, Tyler." He tried to recover. "We'll give you fair compensation. Equity. But we need this narrative controlled." That's when I knew I had him. You think you can control a story that's already been printed on receipts, in code, and in your own filings? A long exhale. "I'll talk to the board," he finally said. "You do that." I hung up. But I didn't go back to the flash drive. Didn't go online. I just sat in my garage, surrounded by every version of the truth, every schematic, every soldered board and firmware draft. I watched the sensor blink, one blue pulse every 6 seconds. Still working. Still real. The story had changed. No longer about an angry father or a forgotten garage. It was about the dot. The signature. The trace that no one else could forge. A friend once told me, it's not the big mistakes that bring empires down. It's the little ones. The coffee ring on the NDA. The wrong date on a form. A signature done in someone else's style. Eli never understood the things that define a man. Not really. But the world was learning. One dot at a time. I didn't file to win. I filed to force the door open. You don't go to war expecting parades, you go to make noise in the halls no one ever expects you to walk through. I filed for injunctive discovery in civil court. Not to claim ownership of Aqualoom. Not even to press charges. Just to compel a review of internal communications, patent documentation, and repository access logs. It was the legal equivalent of walking into a room and flipping the lights on. Eli didn't see it coming. None of them did. I served him through their lawyer. No warning. One morning, he woke up the hero of a smart home revolution. By dinner, he was being subpoenaed by his own father. The tech blogs didn't just whisper now. They shouted. Ghost co-founder files suit against Aqualoom for IP suppression. The garage comes back, Bennett Sr. pushes for full discovery. Investors started pulling their fingers off the trigger. No one wanted to throw money into a lawsuit-shaped hole. A series around that had been rumored to close that week. Dead in the water. I didn't gloat. That's not what this was. It was exposure. In the first round of discovery, they had to hand over email chains. Most were boring, corporate fluff, scheduling nonsense, Slack logs full of bad startup slang. But in one email, Eli wrote something that changed the entire game. It was to Tyler Griggs, dated 3 weeks before the launch event. He's old. He doesn't get how any of this works. I'm the founder now. It's cleaner this way. Cleaner. Those 6 words leaked to the press before our second hearing. When the judge asked if I was pursuing damages, I said no. When asked what I wanted, I gave my answer plainly. I want credit restored. I want accurate documentation. I want to see the books. That was when Tyler tried to settle. He brought me into one of those cold glass-walled conference rooms downtown, the kind with filtered air and fake plants meant to feel expensive but end up sterile. He looked tired. Gray at the temples, dark under the eyes. We're willing to give you a buyout, Jack. Low 7 figures. Quiet. No press. I shook my head. You're not hearing me, I said. I'm not interested in being paid to disappear. You want blood? No, I said, calm as a still lake. I want your calendar wiped. He blinked. What does that mean? 6 months, I said. I want every calendar, every record, every transaction, and every decision made about Aqualoom since the day you first heard the word. I want it all on the table. He swallowed hard. Because you knew, I said. And you helped erase me. He leaned back in his chair and looked out the window like the skyline might offer some miracle clause in his defense. None came. Let me talk to the board, he muttered. The hearing that followed was short. The judge reviewed the signature discrepancy, the metadata, the emails, and the NDA. Then he said a phrase that made Eli's lawyer shift in his seat. We're opening the full review of company documents for the last 18 months. They didn't want that. Because in those documents were receipts they thought had long since been buried, product notes in my handwriting, time-stamped image files, internal memos that referred to Dad's prototype, and a buried Slack message from their marketing lead that read. Should we include Jack in the story at all? Or just stick with Eli? The reply was a thumbs-up emoji. That emoji would cost them more than they ever thought. Meanwhile, I gave no interviews. I declined podcasts. I ignored the DMs. But I knew people were watching now. Not just tech heads. Not just journalists. Real people. People like me. People who built things and got forgotten in the shadow of suits and slogans. I got letters. Handwritten ones. From engineers, tinkerers, a retired physics teacher who said her granddaughter was using my case in a classroom discussion about intellectual property. A Vietnam vet in Montana mailed me a photo of a solar-powered pump he'd invented for his greenhouse and wrote, I know what it's like to be edited out of your own life story. Don't let them. I didn't. Eli showed up at one of the final settlement discussions in person. First time we'd been face-to-face in weeks. He looked smaller. Less polished. His blazer hung off him like it didn't quite fit anymore. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. I know, I said. But you did it anyway. He nodded. I got scared. Investors wanted something sharp. Simple. I thought maybe you'd just let it go. I raised you better than that. His lip twitched. He didn't argue. Just looked down at his hands. I was proud of what we built, Eli, I said. But you were proud of being the only one who got credit. He didn't deny it. That was enough. The settlement was simple. I would receive 18% equity. Founder Emeritus title. Board observer rights. Full financial access. And permanent name inclusion on all intellectual property filings associated with the censor. And a press release, jointly issued, acknowledging that Jack Bennett was co-inventor and original architect of Aquilum's core technology. I didn't smile when I signed. I didn't cry. I just signed it the way I always do, with the dot before the J. They put my name back. Not in lights. Not on stage. But in the places that mattered. The press release went out quietly at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. No grand rebrand. No interviews. Just a 3-paragraph statement on Aquilum's website and sent to a few tech outlets. Aquilum acknowledges Mr. Jack Bennett as co-inventor and early developer of the company's foundational sensor technology. Mr. Bennett's contributions to the original hardware design, firmware logic, and product architecture were instrumental to Aquilum's launch. He has been restored to the historical and intellectual record as founder emeritus. My phone didn't ring that morning. It buzzed. A lot. Emails. Mentions. Texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Most said some version of, finally. I didn't respond to many of them. Just let the weight of it settle. I sat on the back porch with a mug of black tea, watching condensation build on the rim as the sun came up through the maples. Nina used to call this the quiet truth hour, the moment before the world starts talking, when you can hear your own pulse in the trees. I read the press release again. They got it right. The title was ceremonial, founder emeritus, but the 18% equity was real. So were the board observer rights. I wasn't voting on motions or slapping my name on product pages, but I saw everything now: expenditures, manufacturing plans, investor memos, R&D updates. My access badge let me in through the side door of the headquarters, but I only used it once. It was for a board meeting. They didn't expect me to show. Eli was already there when I arrived, seated at the end of the table, sleeves rolled, neck stiff. He gave me a polite nod. The rest of the room went quiet. Tyler Griggs looked like he'd swallowed a tack. I didn't speak until it was my turn to give observations. And when I did, I kept it simple. The product works. But the company's story didn't. That's why you're here with me at the table now. Don't forget that again. No one spoke for a beat. Then one of the newer board members, a woman named Sheridan, nodded slowly. Understood. After the meeting, I left without shaking hands. A week later, Eli stepped down as CEO. Officially, the line was, to focus on product development and innovation. Unofficially, the investors were tired of the baggage. Too many leaks. Too many headlines. Too much doubt. They brought in a new COO, a woman from a logistics startup who knew how to turn chaos into structure. I never met her. Didn't need to. The company was back on track. My name was where it belonged. I didn't want the wheel. I already built the engine. Eli's social media went silent. No more launch events. No more podcasts. I heard through one of the engineers that he'd been told to take a month off. PR management. Brand recovery. Whatever you want to call it. I didn't dance on his grave. But I didn't miss the man he became either. A few weeks after his resignation, he came to the garage. Didn't call. Didn't text. Just showed up with a six-pack of root beer and that same hesitant look he wore when he was 13 and cracked my socket set trying to fix his bike. "You still got the prototype?" he asked. I gestured toward the pegboard. Still blinking. He walked over and stared at it. That little blinking blue light, quietly alive all this time. He didn't touch it. "I fucked up," he said. Quiet. No dramatic apology. Just raw admission. "I know," I said. "I got scared." "You said that before." "I mean scared that I wasn't enough. That the story wasn't exciting unless I was the genius founder. The lone visionary. You ever think maybe it was exciting because it was real?" He nodded, eyes still on the sensor. "You gonna stay on the board?" he asked. "Observer only," I said. "I'm not here to micromanage. I just want to make sure the story stays straight." He glanced back at me. "You don't want to come back?" I shook my head. "I already did." He left without another word. That was the last time I saw him in the garage. Over the next few months, Aqualum's press calmed down. The product launched to decent reviews. Not revolutionary. Not unicorn level. Just solid. A working sensor that helped real people. And every article now said the same thing. Originally developed by Jack Bennett and Elijah Bennett in their home garage. That line was all I wanted. That and the truth living in the open again. I took the check they gave me for the settlement and put most of it into savings. But one chunk, I set aside. For something else. In the end, I didn't take back the company. I took something more permanent. I took the story. They say the world is run by those who write the record, not those who live it. For a while, Eli controlled the narrative, the solo founder, the MBA turned visionary, the face of innovation. But stories can be rewritten. And once I forced the truth into the open, the edits began. It started with the press release. Then the board's forced statement. But the final blow came when I published my own account, not as a blog, not as a press leak, but as a full, detailed technical journal, co-authored with one of Aqualum's earliest engineers who quietly reached out after the lawsuit. We titled it, From Garage to Ghost, The Technical Genesis of Aqualum. It was dry. Clinical. Full of schematics, firmware logs, and comparative patent timelines. But the tech world read it. Professors added it to syllabi. Patent lawyers circulated it as a case study. And every time someone searched Aqualum founder, my name came up first. Not Eli's. In interviews, I declined to gloat. I didn't have to. The tech press did it for me. One article called it the cleanest surgical revenge in startup history. Another called me Silicon Valley's quiet reckoning. I didn't need fireworks. Just facts. Eli, meanwhile, tried to pivot. He joined 2 advisory boards after stepping down, both quietly dropped him within 3 months. Word was out. Investors are skittish around lies, especially ones that leave a digital trail. He moved cities. Deleted most of his social media. Still works, I hear, but lower down. He'll never be in a boardroom again. Not as the top man. Not as the visionary. Every pitch he gives now, someone in the room already knows, this is the guy who erased his father and lost everything to a flash drive shaped like a wrench. I never called to say I forgive him. Because I don't. Some things you don't smooth over with coffee and apologies. Some things you let burn so the lesson etches into the bone. And still, I built something after. With part of the settlement money, I started the Nina Fund for Older Inventors, a quiet grant for those over 50 building useful things no one believed in. Garage innovators. Late bloomers. Builders who got laughed out of boardrooms and told to leave it to the young. The first round went to Reggie, a retired postal worker installing solar kits for tents in homeless camps. When I mailed him the award letter, I included a sensor, version 1, hand-wired, in a box with a note. When they tell you it's too late to matter, show them you never needed their permission. He sent me a photo weeks later, the sensor blinking beside a makeshift shelter, taped to a beam under a plastic tarp. That light, soft and blue, meant something survived. Back at home, I did what I always do when the work is done. I went to the drawer. It's still the same one, left side of the kitchen, just beneath the ceramic clover magnet Nina stuck on the fridge the week she was diagnosed. Inside, her recipe cards, our notarized NDA, the press clippings, and the wrench-shaped flash drive. A little worn now. A bit of plastic chipping at the edge. But still working. I picked it up one more time, thumbed the worn edge, felt the weight of it. Then I placed something new beside it. The final printed version of From Garage to Ghost, with my name stamped on the cover. Not digital. Ink and paper. Proof. I whispered something to no one in particular. Now you can't rewrite me. I didn't want a throne. Didn't want a company. I wanted the truth. And I wanted the boy I raised to learn that burying the past doesn't make it stay dead, it just gives it time to sharpen its teeth. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was earned. So I left the wrench in the drawer, where it belongs. Not as evidence. As a monument. Because in the end, I didn't just take back my legacy. I made damn sure the man who stole it would live in its shadow. Forever.